Welcome to New Atlas Live. I'm Brian Berletic. Joining me, as always, is my co-host Angelo Giuliano. Thank you so much for joining me on such short notice. We didn't plan to do a live stream today, but considering ongoing events, as we're talking, Angelo, the U.S. and Israel continue to bomb Iran, and I say the U.S. and Israel because they're inseparable. The U.S. is bombing Iran through Israel, just like they're waging war with Russia through Ukraine. Angela, the first question I want to ask you, we were getting into it right before we went live, but were you surprised at all? We have been warning about this. First of all, for years, we've been trying to explain what the U.S. is doing. This is about Russia, Iran, China, and division of labor and strategic sequencing. We've talked about it until we're blue in the face. We've showed the policy papers, which we'll get into here in just a moment. But are you surprised? And what does this say about people who are acting surprised?
No, it's just because they don't do their homework, and they're just focusing on just the 24/7 news cycle, whatever Trump says, and so on. They focus on what he said, while they should focus on what they do. And also the long-term plans. It's all about those think tank papers that we talk once in a while. We study. You have to study them. You have to study them in details, and it says absolutely everything there. It's no rocket science. The plan is laid out just right there, and it doesn't matter who's in charge, Trump or Biden. And we see clearly how different is U.S. policy between Trump and Biden. Zero difference. It's just the approach. Maybe some tactical differences, but I would say, I don't know if I just showed you a video just before. It's Trump criticizing Biden, saying Biden is a madman that is going to lead the U.S. towards war against Iran. That's what he said. That's what he said. And guess what? We just started the U.S. because we need to be very clear. A lot of people are confused. They say Israel. Actually, it's a good excuse. The U.S. is playing the good cop, and Israel is playing the bad cop. The same as they're doing with Ukraine. Is going towards Putin and he's saying, oh, well, let's talk about peace and so on. But in reality, it's just a game of good cop and bad cop. And the bad cop in Europe is the EU. And I want to point out something really different, really important of the major shift that we are experiencing in terms of geopolitics and international law. Just go back to the second Iraqi war. Do you know it took, when they were claiming there were weapons of mass destruction, there was lots of arm twisting, fake news, but they were going through the UN. They did still try to make it somehow legal somehow, but it was illegal up to the end. It took 14 months. Now, Trump, what he did was to extend his hand. I mean, it's kind of, pretending to extend a hand to Iran and say, well, let's reach an agreement. So he's pretending that we are going to go for peace and improve the relationship, when in reality, he didn't get what he wanted. And probably what he asked was something that Iran could not accept. And then overnight, they bombed Iran. So that tells you how much Israel and the U.S. are becoming rogue state, and they do not respect international community and international laws, the same as the genocide. And that tells you a lot about how the world has changed. It's complete chaos. It's complete anarchy. Now, whoever is talking to the U.S. would not trust. Why would you trust the U.S. when they're pretending to make peace with you and they're stabbing you in the back? Because, again, we need to repeat over and over to all those people, this is not Israel striking. Israel is a proxy. And a lot of people are confused. And the confusion is made on purpose. They're saying, well, Israel is controlling the U.S. No, just go back to history. Everything, Israel was planted there to control and to put chaos in the Middle East. The same as they're trying to do the same with Ukraine. Ukraine is not an extension of the US. Ukraine is a proxy and they're doing whatever the US wants them to do. Same as Israel, but they want to portray, because it's a scapegoat, they want to portray Israel as the bad guy. Well, of course, they're bad guys. Don't get me wrong. But they want to, so you can shift the blame. It's easy to shift the blame. And they're doing the dirty job on behalf of the US. Because ultimately the US, this is serving whose agenda? It's serving the US agenda. You know, they're going after BRICS. BRICS, what is inside BRICS? There's 3 countries that are attacked right now that are into BRICS. There's Russia. There is Iran, which is de facto going to BRICS, and there's China. So you see, this is only serving U.S. agenda, and it's going to hurt. Going after Iran is going to hurt both Russia and China, especially China. China is extremely reliant on Iran oil. There's a corporation. There's a massive corporation. The figure is $400 billion over 25 years. So there's a commitment from China to buy huge amount of oil every single year. And in exchange, China is going to build a lot of infrastructure to Iran. And they don't want that. The US doesn't want that.
Yeah. So, and Angela, you and I have been having these conversations for a couple of years now. We have been talking about how the window of opportunity for the US to reassert primacy over the planet is closing. The disparity between US military power and the rest of the world, that is closing. And in some ways, it's opening up in favor of nations like Russia and China, and even in some ways, Iran up until relatively recently. And we warned that the US would do things like this, highly provocative, extremely dangerous acts of aggression, either attacking Iran directly or through Israel, or provoking some kind of war with China over the island province of Taiwan, or something somewhere else. Of course, we already have the ongoing proxy war with Russia in Ukraine. We warned about this, and it was so obvious, and it's so painfully obvious. You can see it coming from a mile away. Worse than that, Angelo, it's not just us applying some complex method of analysis. We literally just read their policy papers. They write it all down. These papers are available for free online on their website. Something like Global Empire cannot be kept a secret. It is all open. These policy papers are all on the internet. You can click on them, download them, and read them in their entirety. You don't have to pay a single penny, and you will know exactly what they are going to do. This paper, as you can see, was written in 2009. Every single option has been exercised now, except for an all-out U.S. invasion of Iran. And that, who knows? Who knows? Let's look at the table of contents. I just want to show people the order that it went in. The diplomatic option, and it wasn't to make a deal with Iran. It was to use diplomacy as a pretext to move on to the next option, the military options: invasion, airstrikes, and Chapter 5, what we're watching play out right now as we speak, Angelo. Leave it to Bibi. They're referring to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, allowing or encouraging an Israeli military strike. And then under this option right here, the diplomatic option, and offer Iran shouldn't refuse persuasion. And they're kind of tapping into a mafia meme, sort of, because that's what the U.S. is. It is a global spanning mafia. And I want to read this part. I know it's a little bit long. I know I've read this a million times, but we have to read it again. For those who favor regime change or a military attack on Iran, either by the United States or Israel, because that's all they talk about in this policy paper, either the U.S. doing it or doing it through Israel, U.S. or Israel. There is a strong argument to be made for trying this option first. They're referring to diplomacy. Inciting regime change in Iran would be greatly assisted by convincing the Iranian people that their government is so ideologically blinkered that it refuses to do what is best for the people and instead clings to a policy that could only bring ruin on the country. This is exactly what President Trump is now saying. Iran needs to make a deal now, or they're going to get more attacks from Israel using U.S. weapons the U.S. gave Israel specifically to attack Iran. That is what President Trump just said. In a similar vein, any military operation against Iran will likely be very unpopular around the world and require the proper international context. both to ensure the logistical support the operation would require and to minimize the blowback from it. They're talking about the U.S. operation requiring logistical support in the region. So if the U.S. itself cannot carry out this type of operation without logistical support from others, there is no way Israel carried this out without logistical support from the United States. Very important to read these papers carefully and see what they are openly admitting. The best way to minimize international opprobrium and maximize support, however grudging or covert, and they're talking about nations like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, all of these nations that pretend they don't like Israel but are going to support the U.S. and Israel in an attack on Iran, is to strike only when there is widespread conviction that the Iranians were given but then rejected a superb offer, one so good only a regime determined to acquire nuclear weapons and acquire them for the wrong reason would turn it down. Under those circumstances, the United States or Israel could portray its operations as taken in sorrow, not anger, and at least some in the international community would conclude that the Iranians brought it on themselves by refusing a very good deal. And you will see the mental gymnastics of Trump supporters using this exact argument. President Trump tried diplomacy. Israel and the neocons are trying to drag President Trump into war. President Trump's cabinet is full of neocons. He created a neocon warmongering presidential cabinet. Marco Rubio, one of the worst neocons in Washington, still in public office. Mike Waltz is a neocon warmonger. Pete Hegseth literally participated in U.S. wars of aggression, and now he's overseeing them as Secretary of Defense. Elbridge Colby, we've talked about him before. Angelo, he's a huge China war hawk as well. Michael Anton was brought in for these talks with Iran. He was part of the WMD lies that helped precipitate the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. And even Tulsi Gabbard, people will say, well, she's anti-war. But when she got into her position as Director of National Intelligence in the Trump administration, she was very supportive of the U.S. war of aggression against Ansar Allah in Yemen. So a neocon, war hawk cabinet, presidency, administration. We warned people that this was going to happen. Angela, we've talked about Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth in February, talking about a division of labor and strategic sequencing, dumping the U.S. proxy war against Russia in Ukraine onto Europe, pivoting to Asia. And we suspected that they would stop at Iran along the way because cutting hydrocarbons to China would put China in a weaker position before the U.S. decided to confront them there in the Asia-Pacific region. So this was all spelled out as clear as day. We watched this go from the Arab Spring to President Trump killing Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, him walking away from the first nuclear deal, which was also the exact same ploy that I just read to you about, and his maximum pressure campaign to try to collapse the Iranian economy. And then we remember Biden presiding over the collapse of Syria. And we warned that indicated Russia and Iran were both overextended. They were much weaker than maybe people thought. Iran, especially, their inability to protect the government in Syria from collapse indicated severe weakness. And we warned that they were weaker, more. Hold on, I think Angelo is trying to get on.
Yeah, I'm back. Oh, okay, good.
You're there. Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, just you mentioned just Marco Rubio.
Yes.
No, he just did. He put a message on X, and he said that the U.S. is not behind this. And I think you see the whole strategy now. I see more clearly that every time what Trump is doing is always like switching the blame, because and he uses a lot the deep state. So he needs to portray himself as some kind of dissidence within the whole system, but in reality, he's part of that system. But because that's the only way you can sell that to Americans, because it's a corrupt system, and whoever you elect is going to be the same policy. So now what we're saying is that when it comes to Iran, you literally went by the book. You exposed that just before. You pretend that you want to negotiate. You are going to give an offer they cannot accept, and then you go to war with them. So basically, everything is planned. But you see that story that where they remember how many people, how many of those analysts, they were sure that there was a tension between Netanyahu and Trump. And there was a whole game. Even when Trump put Jeffrey Sachs' video there, what do you think that was? He wants to pretend that he has some problems with Netanyahu because that's very useful. He's saying, well, they twisted my arm and I had to do it. And it's part of a game. It's a whole game, a clown show. Even I speculate, this is more like speculation here, but even Elon Musk tension with Trump, mark my words, I believe this is also another clown show. And this might be related to the next election cycle, 2028. Those guys,
how about
are not stupid. Yeah, they're not stupid. Yeah, please.
No, how about the riots in LA? It's the perfect distraction to bring in everyone on the left-right paradigm, get the Trump supporters to circle their wagons in support of President Trump, and get them more deeply invested in the Trump administration just as this is happening. It just seems too convenient to be a coincidence.
You can go, there's so much of a list. The list is so big. I mean, I'm just going back to last time he was president, is everything that is promised. And he said, well, they gave them excuses, always excuses. How many times people have to go back and say, you have to go back and say, well, you're keeping on giving excuses. Gaza is another one. Ukraine, you promised peace and so on, and you're actually playing that game that you're ditching the problem to the EU, but you're still funding and you don't want peace. I mean, absolutely everywhere is supporting the Gaza genocide. And now Iran, there's no consultation with nobody, just blatant attack Iran, just illegally. I don't want to say bad words here because we live, but it's all BS. I mean, it's all BS. It's just empty. And what I fear is all those MAGA fanboys. And a lot of analysts, I have respect. I still wanted to believe that there was, maybe bad judgment. But now, if you hear those analysts whitewashing Trump on this case, Iran, well, you can call them morons. They are morons. I do not care. You have to be stupid. And the thing is that, especially when you're doing a job as an analyst, you need to take away ideology. Once you are not questioning anymore because you're fanboys, you shouldn't be reporting news. This is not analysis. You need to call a dog a dog. And what I'm seeing here with Trump, and that's the first time I'm not like this, I don't want to, portray a person like saying, oh, he's a madman but I fear that what I'm seeing right now with the arrogance, there's a combination, I'm going to do a bit of psychology. There's a combination of arrogance and it is becoming dangerous. I saw a person in the last few days that was dangerous. And I've never said that. But what we see, when you look at history, even Hitler, he went through some consultation. They met together. And ultimately, what he took a step and he attacked. But here, no consultation. You just attack. It's not Panama Canal. This is a major country. It's extremely critical, and this could lead to World War III. Just imagine for a second, and Iran could do that. They could block the Hormuz Canal. There would be a disaster for the world economy, a disaster. And they said it before. If we are attacked, if it comes to, in the worst case scenario, we would close the Hormuz Canal. Yeah. And you see, he did it. And now, if those people are going to say, well, Trump never started any war, and you see, they'll still say, no, that was Israel. No, this is the US. I see, and Israel is a tool. Don't get, people are so obsessed about this whole thing about this, Jewish, supremacy. They control the US, and well, some elites have some influence. but it's not Israel. Israel was created by, first of all, the British Empire, and then the US took over. But there was a British Empire initiative. 1907, they wanted to create what they called a foreign entity. And this is when you had the Zionist lobby. They tried to say, well, we are willing to fulfill that position. And the idea was to separate the Arab world, which is the Maghreb and the Levant, because it was a united language. They had the same religion, and most important, they had a huge reserve of oil. And the Zionists, they decided to create this entity, Israel, which most Jews didn't want to. At the beginning, most Jews didn't want to. Who wanted to displace Jews there? Was Hitler. Havana Agreement, 1933. People don't do their homework. Havana Agreement, one of the most famous Zionists, fervent Zionists, was Hitler. He wanted to displace the Jews. And initially, the concentration camp were transit camps before sending them to the state of Palestine. So basic history here. So it's not, just to go back, it is not Israel controlling the US. This is an easy theory that helps Trump and most US leaders, because it's easy to say, with this AIPAC and so on. No. It ultimately, Israel is a tool. And you guess who is a victim somehow? Is Jews are a victim of that. Because yes. Israel, for a lot of Jews, especially Jews not living in Israel, it's not their nation. And this is an artificial state. And what they did was, over the last 50, 60 years, was just to rewrite history about this whole idea of Europeans, white Europeans that had links to the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, no. Well, look at their face. They're white people that adopted Judaism, but they have no links to the land of Palestine. I could go on and on, but,
yes.
but this is important. You do agree with me. This is, it's not Israeli controlling the US. That's the easy anti-Semite, I would say, conspiracy.
Yes.
No, it's not. It is not. Ultimately, it's a tool. Israel is a tool.
I completely agree with you. This is something that I talk about over and over again. People talk about how Israel controls the United States, has a population with single-digit number, millions of people. Its population is smaller than the population of Bangkok, the capital city of Thailand. And its GDP is a fraction of the United States. And people say, AIPAC. And I'm glad people notice at least one lobby working in Washington, but that's just one of many. Lockheed Martin and Boeing alone, just two arms manufacturers, spend way more influencing Washington than AIPAC. And then you have to think about the entire arms industry, big ag, big pharma, the oil industry, automakers. When you put it all together, AIPAC is a little drop in the bucket. People have to understand U.S. proxies interact with the U.S. government through lobbyists. There are even lobbyists here. The opposition the U.S. backs here in Thailand interact with Washington through lobbyists. They're not influencing Washington. They're not convincing the U.S. to interfere in Thailand. The U.S. is already interfering in Thailand. They picked these people. They built them up and put them into positions where they could assume power. And they're using the lobby system to interact. It's how the modern imperial court works. It's just an administrative feature of the modern day imperial court. Now, Angela, you're talking about the history of Israel. I always characterize it as a forward operating base of U.S. military and geopolitical interests in the region. I was talking about how under the Biden administration, they succeeded in overthrowing the Syrian government. What was one of the first things the U.S. and Israel did? They bombed and completely destroyed Israel's integrated air defense network. And that cleared a corridor from Israel straight to Iran. Just a little bit of airspace in Iraq they would have to cross over. That they were doing it step by step to wear down Iran, undermine Iran, attack its allies remove them, isolate Iran before carrying this out. And it was an agenda that began under Bush Jr. and the so-called war on terror. It continued all 8 years under the Obama administration, 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Biden. Now we're at the second Trump administration, picking up right where the Biden administration left off and continuing onward with this agenda. And I want to talk about, people are saying Iran must retaliate. Iran must retaliate. Iran's military capabilities were designed to deter this from happening. When they say they were going to cut, close the Strait of Hormuz or anything else, this was to deter the U.S. and its proxies from attacking. But now they have attacked. So we have to ask ourselves, what can Iran do to retaliate? What is even the point of retaliating at this point? What I think Iran is going to do, and they've been sending drones. People have reported missiles that we have not seen any impact at all in Israel, and not I have seen. I think what they're going to do is what they've always done over the last several decades, and that is try to survive. They will try to survive and weather this. We know the United States has a finite amount of arms and munitions. One last thing, because Angela, you were kind of touching on this too. The Trump administration, I know I've already said this, but I have to repeat myself. The very fact that the Trump administration was talking to Iran in the first place about its nuclear program was your first clue that they had bad intentions, that they were negotiating in bad faith, because it's none of their business in the first place. The second thing I want to point out is this attack by Israel on Iran is using huge quantities of very specialized munitions, these bunker buster bombs. The U.S. has been obviously building them, sending them to Israel, stockpiling them for months, if not a year or more, specifically for this operation. They knew this was coming. They prepared together for this operation. And now, and here, just as you're saying, Angela, this is what the Brookings Institution said they would do, the narrative they would create, and this is what the combined liberal conservative media in the West is now trying to push. Israel chose to act whether Trump likes it or not. The attack was from A to Z, conceived, planned by, and facilitated by the U.S. Please. Let's see, where else? There's another one. This is what you were talking about. Then there's Marco Rubio. Trump administration seeks to distance U.S. from Israel strikes on Iran. Yes, that's the whole point of having a proxy. They do the dirty work. Just as the Brookings Institution said, Israel will take responsibility for it, and they will absorb all the retaliation from it. And Angela, to your point that Israel does not control the U.S., if Israel controlled the U.S., Israel is the master, the U.S. is the proxy. The U.S. would attack Iran and take full responsibility and absorb full retaliation for it, not Israel. So right there, just common sense, just look at it at face value. You can see the truth of all of this. Now, yes. I'd
like to go back a little bit, since October 7, and I think, you see, a lot of things are making sense.
We warned about that too, yes.
Remember, we didn't believe into intelligence failure. There was a problem there, especially, you see, they can target. Did you see who they targeted in Iran? They targeted, really the head. The level of intelligence and sophistication, it is mind-blowing. Are you there, Brian? Oh, okay. Well, I continue. Well, there was an extremely high level of sophistication. And when you look at October 7, it started with the war against Hamas, but pretty much we can call it a genocide happening, which is still ongoing in Gaza. Now, what happened after that was to weaken Hezbollah, and then after that there was Syria. You see, they were clearing the path. They needed to weaken Hezbollah. They needed to destroy Syria and to put HTS, which is cooperating closely with the Zionist regime. And in reality, it's an extension of ISIS. And keep in mind that ISIS, they were cooperating closely with Israel. I hope Brian is coming back soon. Brian, are you back? Anyway, So everything is linked. So October 7, we do not believe, Brian and myself, we don't believe in this intelligence failure, and everything was planned. So it was weaken Hezbollah, destroy Syria, and now because they've done all of this, now they can bomb Iran because there's this space of this free space. They control the space and they can bomb Iran. Brian, did you follow what I just said before? Like how
unfortunately, I had to run down and deal with a situation with my kid, one of my children.
I thought it was a bug. I thought it was a bug that was in charge of your channel. But I said just before, you see October 7, see how everything was planned and there was no intelligence failure. And I want to point out, remember those analysts that they said, Mossad is not what he used to be.
Yeah.
Hamas is strong.
Yes.
So you see, so it was genocide in Gaza, basically this whole project of Greater Israel, weakening Hezbollah, making sure they control Syria. They put HTS, which is an extension of ISIS. And by the way, Turkey is cooperating. Turkey has been complaining about Israel, but it's cooperating. So now what happens that they can fly all the way, because Iraq is, of course, controlled by the US. They can fly all the way to Iran. But see, F-35, they have a problem, is that the distance is very long. So those Israeli flights, who's giving them oil, kerosene, is the US, because they cannot go all the way to Iran. So everything was planned from October 7. There was no intelligence failure. And there's a big question mark here. You know, Hamas did what Israel wanted and expected them to do. So there's a big question mark here, really. I don't want to speculate too much. This is a huge topic, but October 7, Israel wanted them wanted this to happen. And since then, everything has been going very smooth. When you look at how smoothly it went, how hard was it? Destroying Hamas, weakening Hezbollah, and toppling Assad.
Yes.
And now what they're doing, this is the level of sophistication is extremely high.
It is on one hand. On the other, I think a lot of this really is facilitated by people just being willfully ignorant, indulging in wishful thinking, being delusional, just refusing to see reality. Remember, Angela, we warned people on October 7th. We said the day after, this is Hamas rolling out the red carpet for Israel to first flatten Gaza, which they then did, and they have since they've done that, and then precipitate a regional conflict that would make it permissive for the US and Israel and others to finish the war in Syria and eventually move on Iran. We warned about that explicitly. We warned about that. And I warned people that Hamas, yes, the Palestinian people have a right to take up arms and defend themselves against Israel. Hamas is controlled opposition. They sprouted out of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the political wing of Al-Qaeda, which is a creation of both British and U.S. intelligence across the region. Just like Israel, created by the British Empire, continued by the United States. They use it to divide, distract, and destroy the region. This is what they've been doing for generations, and they're still doing it today. And you see how effective it is, how emotional people become, and how they abandon their ability to reason, use logic, or any sense of objectivity. You remember, we heard Israel's done, Israel's finished after October 7th. Do you remember that? People were saying that. How do they feel now? How does that sound now in hindsight, looking at everything that has happened? We warned people about this. It's not about us being right. It's about us desperately wanting larger and larger numbers of people using logic and reason rather than their emotions to fundamentally understand this, to identify who is really behind this. I just want to share something that I posted on social media today on X. Let me just share this. This picture.
Right. Yeah.
It's Uncle Sam representing the United States as a matador holding an Israeli flag, and the bull is enraged and fixated on that flag. You cannot see who's holding it. And anyone familiar with bullfighting realizes that as the bull is obsessed with and charging at the red cape, it's usually a red cape, the matador is driving swords into its back. And he keeps doing this over and over again. The bull never realizes the matador is there until the bull dies. Then the bull is dead. He never even had a chance of winning unless he gets lucky and accidentally hooks the matador by coincidence. This is exactly what the U.S. is using Israel for. And they push people's buttons so easily. They're able to manipulate them so effortlessly, no matter how many times people jump headfirst into this and see the disastrous consequences. They're ready. The next thing Israel does to provoke people, they're ready to jump in headfirst again. And the U.S. uses its proxies elsewhere around the globe to do the exact same thing. And again, this game where the U.S. is negotiating with Russia, negotiating with Iran, negotiating with China, all while arming and driving these proxy wars, these campaigns of terrorism against all of these countries, including China. Angela, we've talked about this over the many years.
Brian, yeah. Do you remember how hard it was for us to criticize Hamas? I mean, we are pro-Palestinian. We really do care for Palestinians, and we are outraged at what is happening in Gaza. It's outrageous, really. You know, it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's been damaging my soul, really. But when we started to do our homework and really trying to explain to people, okay, Hamas is fighting, and somehow right now it's a legitimate force. Nobody else is fighting. Actually, there were many other factions, by the way, fighting. People were just obsessed about Hamas. But us doing the homework on reminding people where the Muslim Brotherhood was behind that, and Muslim Brotherhood is MI6, is Western controlled. There was it was propped up by Netanyahu. He facilitated Hamas to get power because it was a useful opposition. You had to have somehow a more radical faction to be in charge, so you could demonize the Palestinians. And it was so somehow when we were doing that, I had like people I extremely respect, but blocking me on Twitter and so on.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We need to be extremely careful of not being, just putting aside ideology and just doing the homework, even if it's inconvenient. It was inconvenient just to say that Hamas was probably a controlled opposition, and they were doing the work knowingly or not knowingly. Probably not. It's probably some within Hamas, not all. The fighters fighting for Hamas, they were fighting for other reasons, but somehow the leadership is something different. And and we're taking hits. We've been taking hits also. Starting from day one, starting to question Trump. Of course, when before being elected, you leaving Biden, and somehow what if it's going to be elect and regret this vicious circle, but you still want to give him the benefit of the doubt. They tried to shut him, and but from day one he started to go back to this completely madness thing. Saying this and that. The opposite one day. It turns around 180 degrees. And then you see, when you look at the policies, it's extremely aggressive. And you see, I had an interview recently on RT, and we were discussing this was how people should just sometimes stop listening to everything that Trump says. And you have people like Peter Hegseth that is actually saying much more clearly what they want to do, and probably he's talking too much sometimes because he's so transparent. We mentioned this, the division of labor. I think he's probably the only one that uses that word, right, Brian? The division of labor, of basically ditching Ukraine on the surface, but ultimately giving the task to the EU to do that, increase their military spending so the US could shift towards China. Trump wouldn't say that. So you see, sometimes you need to listen to the right people. And I would say Peter Hegseth is transparent, and you could learn lots from what he says. But Trump is a lot of smoke screen, confusing people.
Yes.
Extremely confusing, and people,
Yes.
they're being selective of what they want to hear. Oh, he said something
Yes.
stupid, but let's forget it. Oh, I like what he said, but he's a politician. He tells you what you want to hear, but delivery.
Exactly.
And what bothers me is that people focus too much on what he says, not on what he does. Focus on the
Yes.
really.
Yes, because we were talking about that February 12th directive Secretary Hegseth delivered to Europe, telling them you're going to double down on this war in Ukraine against Russia. You're going to build out your military industrial base. You're going to send your own troops in there. We're not sending our troops. This is division of labor. You need to take care of our proxy war because we need to deal with China and everyone else elsewhere. And we will come back, but you need to do this in the meantime. And then that was always the plan. We warned everyone that was the plan. And then what people were doing was every single day, Trump would say one thing, then he would say the other thing. He had one negotiator, creating problems with Russia, another one pretending to, good cop, bad cop with Russia. And it was all just a big distraction. The plan always was to dump the proxy war onto Europe so the US could confront China, also oversee this operation against Iran, and then circle back later. We keep repeating this over and over again. A division of labor, which is literally what Secretary Hegseth called it during his directive, and strategic sequencing, which describes the US being unable to take all of these nations on at the same time. So they need to tie these countries up in different types of conflicts and dilemmas, and then defeat them in detail one at a time. So they're working on Iran right now. They tried to deliver some kind of blow to Russia. It really hasn't worked. Now they're doing Iran. They will go to China. They will come back to Russia. There was never, even for a brief moment, any desire at all for peace. Like I said, the war with Russia and Ukraine is a U.S. proxy war from A to Z. If the U.S. president actually wanted to stop it, he could have stopped it in 24 hours. Because if he pulled the plug on the Ukrainian military, everything would collapse overnight. Because there's literally U.S. generals at the very top of the chain of command running absolutely everything. All of their decisions, all of their targeting to individual targets on the battlefield is determined by U.S. capabilities and overseen by U.S. commanding officers. So I don't want to hear that he couldn't, it was complicated. No, they don't want to. It was always a ploy. It was always a ploy to use negotiations and to shift this onto Europe to buy time. They don't want Russia to succeed. They really want it to freeze if they can. And they need to move on to China urgently because we see how quickly China is rising, how powerful it's becoming. They also needed to deal with Iran, tie that one off completely because they have been working on that. Like you say, Angela, one success after the others from October 7th onward, which we warned about. And then that is exactly what happened. And here we are today. So where does this go next? I saw a comment, somebody said, how can anyone help Iran if they don't want to help themselves? You have to ask yourself, what can Iran achieve right now by striking back at Israel? They have a finite number of missiles. We don't know if their missile production facilities have been struck. They launch all of their missiles at Israel, let's just say. And then what? Israel's still going to be there. It will still have its military capabilities. The U.S. will replace anything that they lose. They also have nuclear weapons. Then what? Then what do you do? Look at Russia. They have fired thousands and thousands of missiles, thousands upon thousands of drones into Ukraine, and Ukraine is still there. So it's not that easy to just wipe a country off the map just using missiles. And that's something to keep in mind regarding Israeli strikes on Iran. Killing these senior leaders is not going to collapse the Iranian government. They have continuity of leadership. They have a chain of command. The next person in command is going to take over. This is what happens with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is still there. They're still hanging on there. So we have to keep all of this in mind. We have to understand realistically how this all works. It's not a Hollywood movie. You don't just push buttons and missiles go and destroy your enemy and then everyone's cheering and celebrating at the end. It's much more complicated than that. Iran is going to think carefully and do what it can with what it actually has, the real capabilities it actually has. Now, a lot of people were criticizing certain people who were boasting about Iran's capabilities. I don't think they were doing that to be maliciously dishonest. I think they were trying to bluff their way out of it. They knew this was coming. They knew Iran was weak, and they tried to bluff their way out of it in the hopes that it would deter or at least delay this chain of events. But here we are, and now we have to pay very close attention to what happens next. I'm just going to warn people one time: if you've come here to talk about how Jews run the world, how Israel, with a population many times smaller than the US, a GDP, a fraction of the US GDP, AIPAC spending a fraction of the money just the arms industry spends to influence Washington, you're gone. You're gone. You're not coming back, because I have no time for you. There's plenty of, you could go to some neo-Nazi website. You could maybe enlist in the Ukrainian army. You could really live out your Nazi dreams there, but not here on my channel. And I don't care what anyone thinks about that. Go ahead, Andrew.
Brian, since it's the last minute, I was unprepared. I have 5% of battery left on my computer. But I just want to say add to what you said just before. You need to wish that actually Iran doesn't put Israel into an existential position, because that means nuclear war. That means so basically Israel cannot lose, and even Iran can hit hard Israel. It shouldn't hit too hard, because it would lead to Israel using the nuclear bomb. And when you look at the track record of Israel, they do not care about the international community. They do not care about international laws. They are willing to kill 2 million people with no hesitation. They're treating them currently as subhumans. Don't think even for a second that they would hesitate to use nuclear bomb if they can claim it. Doesn't need to be
doesn't need to be true.
It is existential. So of course we want punishment. We want somehow, most important, the war to stop. But be careful. You just I would say Iran probably knows that, the leadership know that, and they need to retaliate, but it needs to be still limited. And its capabilities, it's also limited. I would say just they're probably very humble, and then they know their limitations. So answer to retaliate, but yes, but not too much.
Yes, and again, the whole point, everything Iran did was to avoid conflict. Even the retaliation, they had every right to retaliate against Iran. They calculated it very carefully to create the sense of deterrence. The problem is, just as Angela and I have said for years now, the US is becoming increasingly desperate and thus increasingly dangerous. It does not care what actually ultimately happens with Israel, just like it doesn't care what happens to Ukraine or to Taiwan or the Philippines. They are very more than happy to sacrifice all of these governments and militaries that they are building up around the globe to fight their adversaries by proxy or as an extension of their own geopolitical and military power. So when that is the reality, you're in a lose-lose situation. If you retaliate, you wipe the entire country off the map, you still have to deal with the United States. The US is still ultimately, again, you've driven your horns into the Cape. The guy that's actually sinking the sword into your back and killing you is the guy holding the Cape. This is the point I'm trying to get across to people. That's why I have no patience for people that are repeatedly told this and cannot figure it out. And they again, Israel just carried out this strike. They have assumed responsibility and are absorbing whatever retaliation comes of it. Is that what you would do if you were the master and the US was the proxy? The US is the one working behind Israel, not the other way around. People really have to wake up. If you can't get this, there's things, Angelo, that I want to talk about that are even scarier and more pressing of an issue, like artificial intelligence. This is something that is going way underreported, extremely dangerous. It can go very bad in ways people cannot even imagine. But I can't talk about that if people can't even get, no, you can't vote for politicians that are funded by giant multi-billion-dollar corporations. You can't vote for them and have them represent your interests as a voter they don't even know exists or care exists. If I can't explain that and get that through to people, we cannot talk about these more more urgent issues that need to be talked about. And this is why they can constantly get away with it. That's why we're still here talking about this, Angelo, despite talking about it for years, showing signed and dated policy papers, explaining all of this explicitly. I think Angelo's got well, he said his battery on his computer was running low. I'm not sure if he's going to be back or not. But yes, that's what we were talking about. Let's see. Let's show this comment right here. The F-35s were flawless. I thought the chat expert said it couldn't fly. Also, S-300 total, I think he meant to say failure. Now, here's the reality of what happened. The U.S. and Israel took out Iranian air defenses before any of these aircraft came into or near Iranian airspace. That is what happened. And Israel, that's not us saying that to cope. Israel is showing videos of them taking out the air defense systems with drones. This is what the U.S. Intelligence agencies operating in Ukraine just did to Russia, attacking their strategic bombers. And now this is the exact same playbook. They use the exact same tactic against Iran ahead of this attack. So let's see. Let's just go, because we're coming up to an hour. I told Angelo we would talk for about an hour. If you have a question, use capital Q or question in all caps so I can see it. I will star it, and then I will try to get to it. Let's see. I'm going to read through these. And look, you're not going to argue with me and convince me that Jews run the world. The idea that somehow Jews are running the collective West and the poor West, they just want peace and harmony with the rest of the world, and the Jews are the ones standing in between them and benevolent rule over planet Earth. This is just nonsense. The collective West has always been like this for generations. Western imperialism. It's not Jews or some other group that you can scapegoat. It is the West. It is their mentality. It is their culture as it has existed for generations, and they need to get past it. And the world needs to deal with it. The 20th and 21st century have been all about undoing centuries of Western colonialism and imperialism. Okay, here's a question. How come Russia didn't warn Iran? I think Iran knew this was coming. They knew it was coming, and for weeks they tried to negotiate with the US, tried to demonstrate to the world that they were negotiating. They tried to stretch out the negotiations for as long as possible. They also tried to bluff their way through this by claiming they had all of these capabilities, all of these horrible things would happen if they were attacked. And so they knew it. They knew it was coming. They did the best they could with what they had. People have to remember, Iran has been under siege for decades. The US has been trying to undermine and overthrow Iran. So let's see, let's try to star this. People have to understand this is much more complicated. You don't just have an event like this take place and then Russia and China come out with their military and strike. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't. It takes weeks or months to position your military assets to carry out an operation, to project power like that so far from your own borders. And I mean, just think back to the US invasion of Iraq and how long it took for them to set that up. There's a lot of questions coming in, so I'm probably gonna miss a lot of these. I'm trying to star them. It's much easier when Angelo is here to kind of take over. And all right, let me just see. We'll get 20 questions. The first 20 questions that I click on here, we'll go through that and then we'll call it a night. I'm worried that there's going to be much more of this. This is going to continue. This is going to escalate. As Angela and I have been saying this entire evening here in Asia where we're at, it's evening. The US is running out of time. They have become desperately dangerous. They know the window of opportunity is closing, and so they are acting. They are acting, and they're acting very reckless. And these are provocations and escalations that are so far unprecedented. And again, this all happened under the Trump administration, this supposed peace president. This is all happening under, let's see. Okay, again, if you're going to talk about how Jews run the world, you're gone. You're gone forever. You're not coming back. Okay, so just you can try to repeat yourself things that I've already addressed, but you will just be gone. So I have no time for it. You could go over to Stormfront and talk with the people over there if you want. I'm so tired of it. It's so childish. It's like, it's as dumb and idiotic as people who say Muslims are trying to take over the world or the Chinese are taking over everything. It's the exact same thing. And if you lived here in Asia, you would actually see people here who think ethnic Chinese people are conspiring to take over their countries just because they have their families stick together better. They accumulate wealth through working very hard, and they pass it down to successive generations, and people see that as some kind of conspiracy. It's the exact same thing. It happens everywhere. People only think about Jews because they're only looking for Jews. All right, let's do this. I haven't even read this. China is the new leader. It has to react. And of course, China is reacting. But they're not going to react in an emotionally satisfying and immediate way. They understand that they're the ultimate target. They're working to build up their power, their capabilities militarily, economically, diplomatically. They are building an alternative system that is displacing US unipolarism from the planet. And this is why the US is desperately fighting back against China and its growing list of allies. They're going to do it strategically, carefully, and patiently. It'll be very unsatisfying for people that want instant gratification. Next question. Israel and the US are a single entity. It is time we stop talking about whether the tail is wagging the dog. No, Israel is a creation of the US, a perpetuation of the US. It's being used in the same way Ukraine is being used. If you want to make this argument about Israel, then you have to make this argument about every other proxy the US maintains around the world. Ukraine, Taiwan, the Philippines, all of the opposition groups the US is trying to maneuver into power everywhere around the globe. This is what they do everywhere. If you're just laser focused on the Middle East, all you see is Israel. If you zoom out and you see the big picture, you will see the US is doing the exact same thing with all of its other proxies. All right. In which path to Persia? What's next? What's the end game? Regime change. They want to collapse the government of Iran, if not install a client regime into power, at least create a failed state like Syria or Libya. That is the end game. And I'm going to drop the link into the chat. It is free to download. You can read it yourself. Please read it. You have to read it. You have to read it. It's online. I just dropped it into the chat. Did I? I'm going to drop it again here, just in case. All right. Next question. Where are the Iranian hypersonic missiles? So here's the thing. Iran has hypersonic missiles. They already use them. They have demonstrated that they can penetrate Israeli air defenses and hit targets like Israeli military bases. They maintain this capability as a deterrent against Israel, not as a means to wage total war with Israel and win. Okay, so this is why we're going to have to wait and see what Iran ultimately decides to do. Are they going to use them now to get emotional satisfaction, or are they going to save them as this conflict continues to progress and escalate? They've already sent drones, and the point of the drones is to try to saturate and exhaust air defenses. And they will continue doing things like that. Even if they do plan on using hypersonic missiles, they want to saturate the air defenses first before they do so. Here's another one. No air defense. I just talked about that. They took the air defense out through covert operations in Iran. The U.S. has maintained terrorist networks inside Iran for decades. They've even worked with U.S. State Department listed foreign terrorist organizations to carry out these operations in Iran. And so they just worked U.S. Special Forces, Israeli Special Forces, these terrorist organizations. They took the air defenses out before the aircraft arrived. And this is a warning to Russia and China. This is something. Why are all the worst capitalists and the worst communists always Jews? Well, they aren't. You know, this is the thing. You're looking for Jews under your bed, and you're going to imagine that you see them in the shadows. But if you actually look objectively, I'd say the board of directors of any one of these countries, yes, you will see a lot of people who claim to be Jewish. Who are these people, though, actually? These are all white people who have lived in the West for generations. They're indistinguishable from everyone else in the West. They're just as ruthless and as greedy as everyone else in power in the collective West. So you've got to stop with this nonsense. You've got to stop with this nonsense. Why are the Chinese so passive? They have the industrial capacity, economics, and technical expertise to counter these attacks. They are thinking long-term. They are building up their capabilities, not just to match the U.S., but to by far exceed it. They do not want to go to war with the U.S. while the U.S. still has a military advantage. What military advantage does the United States have over China right now? The U.S. has a military that spans the globe, including a navy that spans the globe. They are right now capable and, in fact, preparing to stop Chinese maritime shipping around the globe. This is why President Trump wants the Panama Canal and Greenland. And this is why the U.S. is engaged in the South China Sea. They say they're there to protect the free flow of shipping in the South China Sea. It's all shipping coming from and going to China. So they're actually there to threaten it. And if possible, they will shut it down. And so China is biding its time. It is rising. It's becoming exponentially more powerful than the United States. If they act, they want to act when they are certain, confident that they will succeed. That is what you do if you are a military commander. If you have time, if you can buy time, you will buy time and you will continuously prepare yourself. This is not about being passive. It's about being strategic and smart. Let's see. We tried to warn you what you saying since 2022, but is there any way out of the madness to build multipolar world hard, but to destroy it easier? Well, that's the thing. That is the question. That's what time will tell. Can the multipolar world build an alternative global system faster than the US can destroy it? And that is what we need to do with our time, energy, money, and attention. We have to pay into alternatives to US media, US Western media, to their corporations, to their financial systems. We have to pay into multipolarism. We have to stop paying into the legacy US-led system and pay into multipolarism. That is how the multipolar world is taking on the US. They're not taking them on by fighting them directly or complaining or protesting. They're taking them on by building an alternative system that is displacing US hegemony around the world. Let's see here. Would you describe in some detail the Wall Street corporate financiers who fund the think tanks who author the policy papers? You can go look up Brookings Institution corporate sponsors, and you will find lists over the years of all the corporations that fund these think tanks. And if you look at every single one of these think tanks, it's all the same handful of very powerful corporations: Google, Facebook, Boeing, Lockheed, Bank of America, Pfizer, GSK. Just think about all the big industries, all the big monopolies: Amazon, Facebook. Maybe I said Facebook already. Apple, PepsiCo even is always listed for some reason. So they make fizzy sugar water that rots your teeth and destroys your health. But to them, it's not about these different companies. These companies offer them money, which gives them power. That's why they're invested in them. It doesn't really matter what business they're in. Their goal is to maximize profit and power through these companies. So that's who it is. It is companies you see all around you and that you're probably paying into day to day. Try to cut back, even if it's just a few percentage points. Try to do it. That is what we can do as individuals. Okay. We're getting there. Why would Iran see U.S. and Israel negotiations as serious? I don't think that they did. I just think for their part, they saw it as a chance to delay the inevitable. They knew the U.S. through Israel was going to attack them. They knew it. They tried to delay and play for time as long as possible. That's what they have been doing for years. Did they not learn from Iraq and Russia's experience with these psychopaths? I'm sure that they're all very well aware of it. I think there probably are people in the Iranian government or in the media or something who probably think they could have negotiated with the U.S. because there's people like that in every country. But I think most serious people realized they couldn't, and they were using the negotiations for their own interests. Will future wars be with AI, since all these wars are a testing ground for weapons? Yes, and AI is something that I need to get into. It has the capacity to change the world into a utopia for all of us. It also has the ability, depending on who controls it, when it reaches a certain threshold, to turn it into the most unimaginable dystopia. This is why we need to get on the same page geopolitically over basic things about how the world works so that we can get into these more complex topics. If you can't get that President Trump never had any interest in fighting the deep state, that he was obviously from the beginning part of the deep state, and he was just telling you what you wanted to hear, selling you an illusion. If you can't wrap your mind around that, you're not going to wrap your mind around the dangers of AI, unfortunately. Let's see. Is it true that the Biden administration was okay with nuclear war with Russia? Is that possible in the U.S.? No, look, I don't think anyone wants nuclear war. If the U.S. were to go to nuclear war with another nation, they would do it if they thought it was possible to strike at that nation, destroy it, and parry any sort of retaliation. They might use Israel, which has nuclear weapons, to strike at Iran, so that the U.S. itself isn't guilty of using nuclear weapons again, since they already nuked Japan twice at the end of World War II, after Japan's whole navy was at the bottom of the ocean. So I don't know who said that, but no, that's not true. I don't think they would be okay with nuclear war. It doesn't make any sense, because they're already succeeding with what they are doing. Please start talking about AI. I'm 100% on board with that. It's going to be a whole new ballgame in war and space, mass control, life extension, you name it. Yes, these are some of the topics that I would want to talk about, all of these things. I was just listening to Eric Schmidt, the former head of Google. He was talking about how if you could live to 2050, you're probably not going to die from biological death like disease or aging, because AI will be able to solve these things. It's just one thing. But he also said that whether the US controls it or whether China controls it, and many others in the US working on AI have said this, depending on who controls it when it crosses a certain threshold, which could be as early as 5 years from now, that will determine whether we live in a multipolar world with an equal balance of power, or a world controlled by the US and its interests. And I think we all know who Eric Schmidt is rooting for that race. And by the way, he talked about bombing server centers. He claims that that's something China would do to the US, but we all know every accusation is a confession. If Israel uses nuclear weapons to strike Iran, will the rest of the world cut off ties with Israel? Well, you would hope so. Well, you would hope that now with this escalation, this drastic provocation and escalation the US has carried out through Israel against Iran, that the rest of the world is going to have to seriously reconsider the strategies that they have been using up until now. And we're just going to have to wait and see what they decide to go with. How do you compare and contrast your life now compared to when you were active duty in the US Marine Corps? I was completely brainwashed. I believed everything that I was told by the Western media, even as I saw with my own eyes that it wasn't true. There was a lot of cognitive dissonance and delusion and self-deception taking place. But over time, I began shedding it. It took me a long time to reshape a lot of the things that were wrong with me because of American culture and how lacking of empathy and just basic humanity it really is. I have lived in Thailand almost my entire adult life. I had Thai people, I would say something extremely inhumane and they would say, "What's wrong with you?" And I would suddenly feel ashamed, because I guess in the back of my mind I always knew that the way Americans think and see the world is wrong, especially since I already was opposed to a lot of things the US was doing. But it's so deep because I was born and raised in the US, and I am an American no matter how long I spend outside of America. I will always be an American. And it took a long time to reshape my views and my perception of the world. It's a whole other conversation. Thanks for asking. I hope that little bit gives you some insight. Your analysis is the best. You don't need to debate people, or at least do a show with others who don't 100%. Why don't you debate people, or at least do a show with others who don't 100% agree? Well, who? In the past, I've offered to debate with people, and they always decline for some reason. I don't know why they decline. And when I'm not singing the same tune as other people, they just for whatever reason don't want me on the show. So when you speak of the United States being the center of it all, it's individuals. They have names. Who are they? Well, I just said these are corporations. Their names are listed on contribution lists for these think tanks. You can look them up. They have boards of directors. They have shareholders. You can find out who these people are. Ultimately, it's not about individuals. See, this is the thing. It's about institutions and centers of power. So if you try to target these people individually, they would sprout back up like weeds. You would get one and three more would. This is why I always felt when people celebrate like John McCain dying, number one, you're showing inhumanity as bad as he did in his life when you celebrate his death. Number two, when John McCain died, three more people exactly like him just popped up in his place. You need to solve the problem at the source of their power. That's the corporations and the fact that everyone is paying them their money every month to month. You need to pay into alternatives, create and pay into alternatives. That's what multipolarism is. They bluff. This is what I'm trying to explain to people. Iran knew this was coming. They tried to appear stronger than they actually were. They warned about different forms of retaliation that would follow that they haven't so far carried out, either because they can't, because these capabilities were decapitated with this initial strike, or they're not, because they don't really see the point of it. The point was to deter it from happening. It has already happened. Now they have to think about how they survive. That's what I meant when I said they bluffed. Do you guys think Iran will make an effort to close the Persian Gulf? Who would that hurt more? Who would that hurt more? Would that hurt the United States more or China more? Again, we have to look at the big picture. I don't know the answer to that question, but the answer to that question is going to determine whether or not they close it. It's something I'll have to look into and give some thought about. What should be the lesson for Russia? Continue to negotiate with the U.S. Russia is not negotiating with the U.S. This is them wanting to appear to at least humor the idea of diplomacy. They know the U.S. is negotiating in bad faith. Nobody in the Kremlin actually thinks the U.S. is negotiating in good faith. There are people in the Russian media. There are influencers, pro-Russian influencers who want to believe this. People who support Russia who want to believe this, but no one in the Kremlin believes this. They never took it seriously. This is why they told Steve Witkoff to just stop coming, because it's insulting. It's even the illusion of it is insulting to them. They knew it was going nowhere, but they need to play the game. This is why, remember when the UN was obviously hijacked by the US and did whatever the US told them, why did all of these nations continue participating in it? Except they have to kind of go along with it for public perception, because I've warned that these nations are very bad at information warfare. They're very bad at countering US political interference around the globe. And public perception matters. And what they do has an impact on public perception and will feed into US propaganda if they don't do it carefully. Yeah, that could be a whole conversation here. We're almost done. We're at the 1 hour, 15-minute mark. We tried to, oh wait, this is, but there's, I mean, built in. I think that's a repeat. Okay. Are Israeli diplomats legitimate targets? No. Why would you kill Israeli diplomats of all people? They have the least to do with any of this. And again, this is Israel as a proxy of the United States. So it would be like people wonder, why doesn't Russia destroy the Ukrainian government? Because the Ukrainian government is in charge of anything. The U.S. is. The U.S. is again. Let's go over here. This is Israel. It is the Cape. And when you try to jam your horns into the Cape, the guy who's holding it is going to jam a sword into your back. That's why you don't do that. Okay, let's see. While I'm answering the questions, I'm not able to see the live chat. Here, let's just do this one. This is a good one. Will there ever be a Palestinian state? I mean, there could be. There could be, and people don't believe me when I say this, but there is a time in the possible future where Israel is a functioning nation state with an independent foreign policy, coexisting with everybody else in the region. That is a possibility. There are people in Israel right now who would like that. And it's the government, the regime installed into power in Israel that is preventing this from happening. And this is why I tell people, stop obsessing over Jews. When you do that, there's a lot of Jews out there who are on your side. And when they hear you talking about generalizing about Jews, it's just like when Islamophobic, racist idiots talk about Muslims and generalize about all Muslims. You force them to circle the wagons with the rest of the people creating the problem, rather than seeing that you're rational and reasonable and someone that can be worked with, which is why countries like Russia and China are not clobbering Israel over the head. They're trying to build bridges with Israel because they see someday in the future they can cross over. There can be a transition, even though they know now there's really no hope of it. Here's another good question. I don't know who you mean when you say Islamists. I would say, I think you're referring to brainwashed extremists who think they're serving Islam by being extremists because they've been brainwashed. You have to remember, the US spends billions of dollars through its own propaganda worldwide, but also through the National Endowment for Democracy, which, by the way, is still in operation, never closed down, was not dismantled, was not defunded. And as a matter of fact, they've just passed a new policy. I wrote an article, and I will do a video about this shortly. NED, duty to care. They just announced a new policy where they're no longer going to be disclosing any of the groups that they're funding, because people were waking up to it, figuring it out, and exposing all of this and fighting back. So the Trump administration did what is called a limited hangout. They admitted to some things. They volunteered information about other things, including the National Endowment for Democracy and USAID. But ultimately, they never dismantled or defunded any of this. It was streamlined, sharpened, and better hidden. And that's how they're now operating. The NED, this is the NED's website right now. It's still there, still operating. They're still getting funding. The NED funded opposition, I still see them literally outside the window, walking up and down the streets. So that is the reality. All right, I think look, this again, this is the mentality that I'm talking about. If you keep talking like this, the people in Israel who would work with you and could create a secular nation state coexisting with everybody else, including a Palestinian state, you're pushing them away by being unreasonable. So you have to stop. It's there already. It's already there. People have been living there for decades and decades now, almost generations now. In an ideal world, yes, we could just wave a magic wand and make these horrible things that should never have been done in the first place go away, but they have been done. Now you have to think of the most humane, practical, best way to do this without becoming the very people you claim you hate and end up doing the very same things you claim they're doing to others. You have to be more humane than them. I know it's hard to fight against people who stand for nothing and are willing to do everything, but if you're going to just become like them, to beat them, and now you have become them, what have you accomplished? You've accomplished nothing. Let's see. Yes, again, do you think these people wake up and they just came to this decision on their own? Or do you think it's because, just like Americans, they're extremely propagandized and conditioned deliberately to be inhumane and to irrationally hate the Palestinians? Just like the Ukrainians, you think they all just suddenly woke up one day and wanted to be Nazis dying for NATO? No, they were conditioned that way through years and years and years of US interference in Ukraine, through the media, through the education system, through the political system. This is how they've conditioned these people to be so irrational, hateful, and inhumane. And the solution to it is not to become as inhumane as them. It is to find the source of the problem and deal with it, not treat the symptom. Go to the source of the problem. The source of the problem is US hegemony and the corporations that are driving it and benefiting from it at everyone else's expense. All right, I think we did a good job. We're at 1 hour, 20 minutes. I will keep a very close eye on all of this. Still, we have to remember there's still a US war with Russia in Ukraine. This is going to continue. I haven't checked what has happened recently, but when I went live, Israel was still bombing Iran. And of course, all of this is leading to a confrontation with China. This is not about doing Israel's dirty work in the Middle East. This is about further isolating Russia and China. That is what's next. This is what we have to raise awareness for. We have to get everybody on the same page so people can work together against this. It's just everybody. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I want to thank Angelo again for taking time out of his day on short notice to join me for this live stream. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. Thank you, everyone who's watching this after it has streamed live. Please like and share. Check the video description below for all the places you can find and follow both my work and also Angelo's work. There are also options there to help support both my work and Angelo's work. I do not monetize my YouTube channel. There shouldn't be any ads popping up. If they do pop up, just skip them. They're not helping me out at all. If you do want to support my work, the options are there in the video description below. So thank you again. Everybody be safe. Take care.